our next speaker was actually one that got away last year. It was just before Stoicon-X Melbourne 2024 that I found out that here in Melbourne at Monash University, Dr. Jacqueline was running a project to do with Stoicism and women in the early modern period. And it was kind of too late then, but early in the new year I emailed Jacqueline, and even though she's been on extended leave this year, she's been so responsive and so willing to get involved with Stoicon-X Melbourne, and so I'm delighted to welcome today Dr. Jacqueline, Professor of Philosophy at the University of Monash University.
Thanks so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. You'll see that in the Stoic oratory tradition I've abbreviated my title because brevity is a virtue, according to the Stoics. But despite that, I'm still going to talk about historical texts and whether they can offer any lessons to young women today, because as Judy said, I am an historian of philosophy. I do look at women philosophers in the early modern period and how they engaged with Stoicism. In particular, as part of my work, so I should stand here so you can hear me, I try to challenge two common assumptions. So the first assumption is that historically speaking, Stoic philosophy has been a history of men's ideas. And so we hear about Chrysippus and Zeno and Cleanthes, we hear about the Roman Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca and Epictetus, of course. But we don't hear about any women philosophers, and there's a good reason for that, and that is that no texts by women survived the ancient period. So we hear about Portia, but we don't know what her ideas were, and so on. The second assumption I try to challenge in my work is that Stoicism was traditionally a manly philosophy. And again, we have history to thank for this. It's perhaps not so much a perception we have about Stoicism today, but when you read the Platonist commentators in antiquity, there's often this contrast between the manly Stoic who's impervious to outward circumstances and has this perfect self-control and, of course, freedom from the passions. And that is contrasted with the Epicureans, who are feeble, who value pleasure, which is seen to be effeminate. And of course, if anyone has read Marlon Grant-Wilder's recent book on gender and sexuality in Stoic philosophy, she looks at that contrast in the history of Hellenistic thought. And to give you an example, Marcus Aurelius says, "And let this truth be present to thee in the excitement of anger, that to be moved by passion is not manly." Because, of course, strength is about having this control over your passions, and to have strength is to be manly. But I'm part of a movement that challenges these preconceptions or these biases about Stoicism. Of course, we don't today think of Stoicism as manly, and many recent scholars have in fact pointed to the feminist potential in Stoic ideas. And of course that lies in the fact that Stoics believe that all human beings, they have Zeus, as Courtney was talking about in the previous talk, they have within them this capacity, this reasoning capacity that all human beings have, that makes them capable of attaining virtue and of attaining sagehood and leading a life of human dignity. And there are, in fact, some Stoics who make that argument. We have Musonius Rufus in Rome, who argued women should be educated on that basis. And now we know that there were women who practiced and wrote about Stoic philosophy. We were just looking in the wrong period. We have to look beyond ancient Greece and Rome to find the women who embraced Stoic philosophy. And so that's where my work comes in. I look in the early modern era in particular. And here we can find many women, not all of them I would call like Stoics, but they certainly embrace with the Stoic philosophy. We have Elizabeth Carter, who was one of the first translators into English of Epictetus's discourses. We have Elizabeth I, who was also translating Seneca from a very young age. Often they were translators, but then again they would also engage with Stoic metaphysics. Margaret Cavendish engaged with the Old Stoa, and then there were those who engaged with Stoic ethics, and particularly the Roman Stoics, so people like Mary Estelle and Mary Chubley and so on. So my question today is, if we look at these writings from women of the early modern era, do their texts have any worth and relevance for young women today? Are they going to have any practical, therapeutical benefits, for example? And because I'm a philosopher, straight up I like to think about difficulties with asking this question. And there are a few problems that we think might raise themselves straight away. So let's address them from the outset. The first one is that we might think that young women today face a plethora of problems that early modern women couldn't even have dreamt of. So this is challenging, or at least querying the relevance criterion here. And here are a couple of difficulties facing young women today. Unrealistic beauty standards on Instagram and TikTok, a comparison culture that's fostered online, creating anxiety and depression and eating disorders, cyber harassment and cyberbullying, deep fake porn, again something that early modern women couldn't even have dreamt up in their wildest dreams, online threats and doxing, stalking on gaming platforms and so on. I mention these particular issues mainly because, early modern women wouldn't even have had any concept of this. How can their advice possibly apply to young women facing these challenges today? But I also highlight these difficulties in particular because studies have shown, I'm not being very scholarly here, I should have my references, but studies show that young women are more likely to suffer from gendered-based abuse online than young men today. It's just something that has been established, and they face harms in these particular forms. So how could this possibly be relevant? Well, I'll try to address the relevance issue as I go along, but another question we might have is do we really think that Stoic advice will be of any help anyway? So we might think, maybe not this audience, but certainly people with certain preconceptions about what Stoic philosophy is and the limitations of Stoic philosophy might think that it's not going to be terribly helpful in addressing real life harms to real life women who are facing gendered online abuse. Might think it's problematic because it advocates what we could call a retreat to the panic room. Okay, this is me riffing on Isaiah Berlin's idea of the retreat to the inner citadel. I don't know if anyone's seen this movie. I first saw Jodie Foster's Panic Room in America, where I don't know if it's typical of an American audience, but the audiences were screaming. It's a story about Jodie Foster who moves into a house that has this wonderful room made concrete and steel. It's a panic room. It means that if you face home invasion or some kind of home intruder, you've got somewhere to run to that's a safe, controlled environment where you're not going to suffer any harm. She has surveillance equipment in there and so on. And I use it as an analogy because some people think about Stoicism in this way. It's a retreat to the panic room. It advises you that any threat comes your way, rather than physically remove that threat, the Stoic ideal is to remove, say, the fear and the anger that comes with it, to change your disposition of mind. And I raise this as a difficulty and a problem because we might think we want something more than this to meet the challenges facing young women today. We might think it doesn't seem very helpful. It smacks of quietism to tell women, control what you can control. Quietism is the view that we should calmly accept the way things are. Or you might even think at worst, it smacks of victim blaming. If you're disturbed by this, if you're upset by this, the problem's with you and your psychology, not with the forces out there who are targeting you. So when an intruder comes into the house, we might think, rather than retreat, in terms of long-term benefits, you might want to push that intruder out of the house and do Mick Malthouse and kick them down the stairs, okay? you might want to face those real life harms rather than advise some kind of transformation of your moral psychology, say. I think we can get around both these problems, the relevance problem and whether or not Stoicism has any worth for women today. And my case study is going to be Mary Chudley. So she was one of the authors that I pointed to before, an early modern author writing in 17th, 18th century England. And she published a book called Essays Upon Several Subjects in Prose and Verse. It's kind of a handbook, and made up of essays where the chapter headings are like grief, anger, fear, friendship, and so on. So essays on these topics. And her source text was Epictetus's Enchiridion, his handbook, with a Platonist commentary, very Platonist commentary by Simplicius. And so we know that she referred to this book because she has at least 10 or 11 verbatim quotations from Epictetus throughout her essays. You won't be able to read them all now, I just put them up for entertainment value. And we know from these references without a doubt that she used George Stanhope's English translation of Epictetus's manual from 1694. Now, very much like the precepts in Epictetus's book, she's directing her advice at young students. She's assuming no knowledge. They're trainees. She really only refers to like the first third or the first half of the Enchiridion, which is directed at young students who are just learning the ropes. And like Epictetus, her advice is designed to help her readers transform their moral psychology and overcome hardships in life. Unlike Epictetus, her advice is exclusively directed at young women and the challenges that they faced in early modern society. And above all, her essays are designed to equip young women to overcome pain, poverty, infamy, and death. Now this is where I think she becomes relevant, because you'll see that could apply to anybody's circumstances in any lifetime, in any geographical location. The mental and psychological pain of online abuse, the loss of livelihood, the loss of income that might result from certain abuses, infamy, the loss of reputation, the loss of good reputation, concerned women even more so back in early modern England, because once you were tarred with infamy, of course, that could destroy your entire life. And death, who doesn't face that as a difficulty or a problem? So I'm not so concerned about that original worry I raised about the advice being relevant. I think it's going to be broad enough that it's going to capture all of these circumstances, or at least be designed to help women cope with these circumstances, which could occur in any period, any time period, any location. Okay, so what are the lessons? These are what I've pulled out from Chudley's text. And the first one, you will recognise from the Enchiridion, Epictetus's handbook. It's the very first lesson that you have to learn. Above all, you have to attain that skill of distinguishing between what is in your power and what is not in your power. She says, what has a dependency on us is free and cannot be hindered from being ours, and what has not is dependence on us, but is subject to another, and may be denied us at pleasure. And you'll see here from the second quotation that's echoing Epictetus. I think that's his second precept in the Enchiridion. Okay, so this is just a first step. It sounds a little panic roomy, okay? Because what is in our power, okay? What is our sphere of autonomy, the sphere where we know that we can be free and that our actions are up to us? It's the sphere of the mind. Anything, any operation of the mind, according to Chudley. What is ours, what's in our power? Our judgments, our opinions, our inclinations, our aversions, and our desires. I think someone was saying earlier, it was our speaker on Zoom, it's a kind of superpower. We all have it and we have to tap into it. What it's not, it's everything outside of that, sorry. All the goods of fortune, including what kind of body you inhabit, including your health, including your family. These are things that are completely outside of your power, can be taken away from you at a moment's notice. Okay, like I said, it sounds panic-roomy because it's saying retreat, retreat, retreat to what you can control, that concrete and steel in your mind. But it's just a first step, so hang in there. The second lesson, get clear on what is truly good. A lot of those things, a lot of the unhappiness that women face, according to Chudley, their wretchedness, stems from having mistaken judgments about what is good and what is bad. And of course, she's tapping into the Stoics here, and in fact, some of her comments sound like they're echoing Stoic on what is truly good according to the Stoics. The Stoics say that what is good is that which can only ever benefit you and never harm you. So a lot of those things that we have thought of, that we've brought up to think of as goods, like beauty and health and wealth and friendship and even life itself, they are not always a good to you. Chudley says you can think of wealth becoming a burden to some people. Poor rich people. Wealth can be such a burden. You can think of friends who lead you morally astray and lead you to your destruction. These things seem like goods, but they are not always goods. Okay? So Chudley points out that young women are unhappy because they're encouraged to build their esteem on precarious foundations. And in particular, they're taught to build their self-esteem and to value themselves for their external appearances. This is where she starts talking about the kind of extreme value that young women are taught to place on their appearance. "'Tis strange," she says, "that dependent creatures should be so vain as to be proud of what they cannot call their own, and which 'tis in the power of 10,000 accidents to deprive them. For what can be more childish, what a greater argument of stupidity, than to be proud of a face, something that disease may quickly spoil and over which time must unavoidably triumph." So disease can spoil your beautiful face. Age will inevitably spoil your beautiful face. Why do you value it so much? And so this, of course, in itself, again, not necessarily something that's going to change a woman's outlook straight away, but it does encourage a kind of consciousness raising about that comparison culture that young women might be in today. Why do you value something so much that could be taken from you like that? That is not truly good. Not truly good in the sense that it will always benefit you and never harm you. So start thinking about that. And teaches women not to value themselves excessively on external appearances. Okay, so what should young women value themselves on? And a classic Stoic move here is to talk about the cultivation of the mind. If anything would justify our vanity, Chudley says, it would be the endowments of the mind, our having larger shares than others of those perfections which are the glory of the rational nature. And among those, of course, are truer and more solid judgments. Okay, so in short, here she's referring to the perfections of virtue. And as we know, the Stoics don't think of virtue as we do today, not this audience, obviously you're more informed, but as a kind of chastity or a kind of saintliness. No, virtue, above all, in the Stoic philosophy is a skill. It's an expertise. It's proficiency. And in particular, it is this rational skill of selecting those things that are in agreement with our nature as rational and sociable creatures. Okay, that sounds a little bit precise, a little bit technical, but of course the Stoics think we should value this because this skill is the only thing that can truly benefit you in life. Not only that, it's that superpower, that skill that is completely within your control, that you have control over in all the circumstances of life. So to obtain virtue, women must learn to distinguish between those things that are truly good and bad and those that are merely indifferent. The good news is it's entirely in their power. So how, again, does this help young women today? Well, it it's the start again of a kind of therapy, a kind of transformation of their moral psychology, a transformation of their values. It says that you can select or prefer beauty and good health and wealth. These things are often good for your nature, good for your natural constitution. It's much better to be healthy than sick, usually, in most of the circumstances of life. But you must cease to give these things that sense of specialness you've been giving them, and cease to place such excessive value on them. And it's important, of course, to value what is most in your own power. Okay, so I hope I'm not going over time here. Another important lesson, and that will come from this transvaluation of value that you have started to effect, is that you must eliminate the passions. Now, the passions, again, in Stoic philosophy, it's a technical term, as we know. It's not just any old emotion. It is those bad, unhealthy, defective emotions you've got that are incompatible with your reason and that are destructive of your nature as a rational creature in some way. And so, according to Chudley, women are poorly educated such that they become tyrannized over by their passions. They become slaves to their passions, particularly of grief and fear and anger. She wants to liberate women from that. And of course, the way to do that is not to value those external things quite so much that we always have, like beauty and health and wealth and friendship. Because passions come from the loss of those things. Like excessive sorrow comes from the loss of friendship, for example. Excessive fear comes from the future anticipation that we will lose something really valuable to us, such as our material wealth and our beauty and so on. And you need not suffer under those emotions. You need not be enslaved by those emotions, if only you value those things in proportion to their worth. Okay, so you probably all read the quote by now, but the quote here about "He is properly my Lord and Master who hath it in his power to gratify my wishes or make me afraid," is saying that as long as you don't desire these particular things, no one's going to be able to tyrannize over you in this way. No thing, no material object is going to have that hold on you. The way to tame the passions is to not value those things that are outside your control in an excessive way. Okay, and earlier Mitchell was talking about exposure therapy, and you do find in Chudley all those recommendations from Epictetus about how to gradually wean yourself off these material objects. Picture your favourite earthenware cup smashing and breaking. Imagine yourself feeling upset about that, but then remind yourself, well, it was just fragile and brittle anyway. It was always going to break. It was never going to last forever. Start having that kind of behavioural cognitive therapy as part of your daily regime, and you'll eventually wean yourself off these external goods. Okay, and of course, part and parcel of that is that you should learn not to be a slave to others' opinions. And here we have Simplicius commenting on Epictetus, who's saying, "Resolve not to be a slave to the opinions of the world, not to make what idle and silly people approve any measure of our actions or rule to walk by." And Chudley goes on to say, "I should be as little moved at censure as applause." And I think this again is an important Stoic lesson for young women today. You may find yourself going to social media to find all the Instagram likes, to find the good reviews of your book, to find people saying, "You look so beautiful," or "Your holiday looks so fantastic," and so on. And you have to wean yourself off the good comments as well. Why do you have to do that? Because they're founded, both the criticism, your pain at the criticism you feel and the joy at the praise you feel are founded in the same value for external things that are outside of your control. So if you're really going to transform your moral psychology, you have to be not indifferent to that praise, but you have to take it down a notch and cease to give that praise the specialness you've given it. And I love here the Ben Jonson quote from the same period, which I'll try not to mess it up, but Ben Jonson says, "Their praise and dispraise is to me alike. The one doth not stroke me, the other doth not strike." And that's meant to be the You're not hurt by criticism, but you're not puffed up by praise either. And here again could be a valuable lesson for women today. Okay, is this still a panic room response? I had to put this picture in. When I looked up Jodie Foster panic room, it came up with Jodie Foster panic room tank top. Everyone's obviously looking up Jodie in her tank top in this film. She looks great. Is it still a panic response? Is it still a retreat to the inner citadel and a failure to address the real threat out there in the real world and attain justice? I think that it is a worry, it is a concern that this might advocate a kind of quietism, but this is not Chudley's stance. So here I'm just rushing through because I realise we may want to go and have lunch at some point. This is what Chudley says to address that point about, well, is this a quietist response? Is this saying the problem's with you? Is it a victim-blaming response? And she says this, "From what I've said, I will not have it thought that 'tis a stoical apathy I've been recommending, and that in order to the being happy, I would have persons insensible," like not feeling anything at all when you're criticised online, or you're doxed, or you're cyber-harassed, and so on. No, I design no such thing. I allow young women to delight in what they possess, to be thankful for life, careful of health, to enjoy riches, to endeavour to get and preserve their reputation, their good reputation, to be pleased with honours, to love their friends and kindred, and to be solicitous for them. But then I would have all this done without disturbing their minds, without grieving for such disappointments as they may probably meet with in reference to each of them. In word, I would have them keep them without anxiety. So it goes on there. So what is she saying in 21st century language? What she's saying is that it's, first of all, it's okay to have good feelings about these things. It's okay to feel good when you get praised, when you attain wealth. Or, you know, it is also okay to be upset when someone damages your reputation. Why is that? Well, that's okay, provided that those feelings are compatible with reason and they're not excessive and destructive and somehow contrary to your nature as a rational being. And of course, in the Stoic philosophy, she says, I'm not advocating a Stoic apathy, as though the Stoics advocate complete insensibility. They don't. They allow the good feelings, the eupatheion. You can feel joy at someone's good fortune. You can be watchful and look after your reputation. And not only that, I think the Stoic philosophy, and Chudley too, you can do something about it when someone damages your reputation, when someone harms you or injures you online and so on. You can take action. It's just that you have to remind yourself that some things are going to be outside of your control. You do everything that's in your power, but of course, the only thing that is truly going to be in your control is what's going on in here. So I don't think this is a philosophy that advocates quietism. Certainly that is not what Chudley intended. You can still do something about this. It's just when you hit that brick wall and you can't do anything, then you have to hold on to that transformation of character you've brought about in yourself, which ceases to give those external things that prominent special place that they had in your life, such that they were turning you into this quivering, passionate mess whenever you lost them or you didn't gain what you intended to, and so on. So I do think, so to answer my question, could these Stoic texts have worth and relevance for young women today? I think the answer is yes. There has to be a bit of a translation project that goes on, obviously. But I think Chudley offers a practical Stoicism that teaches women to anchor their worth in terms of what lies within their control, to cultivate their reasoning abilities, particularly critical thinking skills, that weighing of pro and con, and resisting destructive emotions and nurturing good feelings instead. And I don't think this is, as I said, I don't think this is a panic room response. For today's young women facing the pressures of body image, online criticism and comparison culture, I think these lessons, as ancient as they are, can still have worth and relevance. Thank you.
think you'll agree with me that these lessons from Mary Charlie do definitely have applicability and resonance. I'm just going to jump in with my first question. So obviously Charlie was working in a Christian environment. Does she consciously either kind of downplay the fact that this is kind of pagan stuff, or does she actually name check Epictetus, or does she kind of put in a Christian framing?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question, and I kind of glossed over that, but it's super important that we recognise that she was a devout Anglican. Okay, so there's a few things to mention there. The first is that she was reading Epictetus through Simplicius, who was a Platonist. Okay, and the Platonist, it was no accident that Stanhope translated that particular edition of the Enchiridion, because the Platonist philosophy is much more amenable to the Christian philosophy, because it says that the soul and the body are separate. You're living this life at the moment, and your soul is imprisoned in your body. How do you attain it? How's your soul going to get free of that body and go back to God? Well, you're going to free it from those terrible bodily passions that keep disturbing and tyrannising over it. So that's one way of duty in which she makes the Stoic philosophy more compatible with the Christian philosophy, because in fact, getting rid of your passions is rising above the body in some way, not a viewpoint that the Stoics would necessarily embraced. The other thing, of course, is the points about God. One contrast here, the Stoics were pantheists about God. So they didn't have personal conception of God, although, of course, that designing fire, that pneuma that's within you is divine and godlike. But Charlie embraces the Platonist philosophy because they have more of this idea of God as this demiurge, the one, this one overseer, and you will return to him, and that's a common theme. When she talks about dependent creatures and you're not in control, well, you're not in control of your life because God could, of course, take it away at any moment. So the themes about grief, and particularly grieving for your children and so on, are often themes about, sure, enact a Stoic therapy, but keep in mind that your life was never your own to begin with. The life of your child was never belonged to that child to begin with. It was God's to take as he wanted to. So she tries to reconcile them. The Stoics were reviled by Christians in the period, but then some of them tried to make them compatible, and they tried to say, oh, we don't advocate Stoic apathy because we're Christians and we want to advocate love and kindness towards everyone, and especially pity. But what they didn't see was that the Stoic philosophy could actually accommodate that. It wasn't a philosophy of complete ridding of the emotions and complete insensibility. But they just, I think they deliberately misread it just to say Christianity can offer something here, can offer something more than that the pagans didn't see. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some tensions there, I'd say.
Yeah.
Any other people with some questions?
Can we please have a copy of your slides?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you. You did, not just for Jodie Foster in a tank top, but for the quotations. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I know. I kind of put them all up because I thought, well, I'll just show you how much she was reading Epictetus. I didn't expect you to be able to read them all, but these are the main quotes, and it's the early modern translation, which of course is very beautiful and very poetic to our ears today.
I think the lessons, the slides on the lessons there are applicable to
anybody.
girls.
Yeah.
So I'd like a copy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure. And I should say, I pull these lessons out of Charlie. She doesn't say it like, this is lesson 1, this is lesson 2. I pulled them out. What she does is she offers a book, much like Seneca's On Anger and other books like that, where you dip into them. Like, you're feeling grief. I've got an essay on grief that you can read here. You read this. But at the same time, like, if you read it all from beginning to end, you can see these lessons gradually being put on top of one another, one by one. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. I'd be desperate to hear an analysis by women,
Thank
from
you.
women past and future, because it's just so male universe when you're in a Stoic world. So it's just fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. Oh, there were Stoic women. I had a picture of Portia up there, but as I said, we just have unfortunately, no surviving text on them, and it is the case with the men too. We especially the old Stoic, we only have fragments and we don't have complete text. It's a really sad thing, but that's why you need to go a couple of centuries forward and come to the early modern period where there was a Stoic revival born of this effort to make Christianity and Stoicism more compatible, and of course that's that's the Neo-Stoicism movement, and that's the period that I look at. So
Even if you Google books to read to learn about Stoicism, they're all published by men.
yes, that was true. Except for Bridget Delaney.
And I bought your book. And I'm also thinking, I have a young woman in my life, my daughter, but I was thinking this, we're at two different ends of our life. She's a young adolescent and I'm an older, and I was thinking this applies to both ends of that spectrum as well.
Absolutely.
And it's not just young women.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Jack, too, I didn't know the book you name-checked. Was it Gender in Stoicism?
Yes, Marlene Groenewalder's, I think it's 2018, Gender and Sexuality in Stoic Philosophy, so it covers all these issues from the point of view, were they in manly philosophy, were there any men or women, what did they say about women's education? That's when she starts talking about Musonius Rufus, and
Yeah, I'm happy to get that as a resource. And it would be great to have all these slides from all the speakers, but we'll sort that out after the event. Yes, go ahead.
Given the very early slide you showed about the modern problems of
yes,
technology, given that we covered the internal responses in this, however, at the very end of your presentation you talked about possible external
Yeah.
responses.
yeah.
Are we in a kind of work in progress time to develop those external responses to those very real technological threats that you outlined?
Yeah, well, I hope we are. I hope we are. I mean, I pointed to, I don't know what the study was, that was looking at the fact that women are more likely to suffer gender-based abuse online.
Yeah.
And I think just recognising the problem, first of all, as a gendered one, that cyber harassment and doxing and deepfake porn is a problem that women more disproportionately than men suffer from. That in itself, just recognising that, hopefully, kickstarts someone doing something about it. But whether it's in big tech's interest to do that, I don't know. So I hope that recognising the problem will be part of the solution. But it's a wild west out there, isn't it, at the moment? So watch this space. Yeah.
Just stop children going online. Perhaps we should include women as well.
Sorry, say that again. I didn't hear.
I think Steve was a bit tongue-in-cheek. Stopping kids going online, maybe we should stop women going online as well.
That would be, send them back to the panic room. Yeah. Just don't go there. Don't go there. It's not safe.
Peter had a question.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. And like, I'm interested that I knew about, say, Michel de Montaigne a bit earlier.
Yes.
Never heard of Chudley before.
Well,
And that's,
well, Montaigne was very close friends with a woman called Marie de Jazz de Gournay, and she wrote Stoicism in her feminist treatises. So that's still work to be done as well. Yeah. I didn't mention Brigitte Tot too. So I only listed English women. I didn't list the French, and Brigitte Tot is Danish. She translated Seneca, and there's a manuscript, like 500-page manuscript in Copenhagen, which some of my colleagues are now starting to transcribe and translate into English, and that's a Stoic text based on Senecan principles. So the work is still happening. It's a recovery project. It's happening.
but my question really
Oh,
is,
sorry.
if I want to read more of Chudley, is it easily, can I find her writing?
Yeah, so I cited a 1993 modern edition by Margaret Ezell, E-Z-E-L-L. You might have to go through a library. You might be able to buy it on a second-hand platform like 8 Books or something like that. It might be tricky, but you can get it in nice typeface and nice, not modernised, but that in some ways that's a pleasure. Yeah.
But it's also less mediated, right? You're getting the reception as it was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Look, this has been wonderful, and I'm so glad that people got great questions. But now it's time to have our lunch, so please thank Jackie once again.